Rebecca and Jason Walsh had been saving for their 10th wedding anniversary trip for over a year. The couple from suburban Chicago had finally splurged on a long weekend at the historic Grandview Lodge in Vermont. Planning to spend Columbus Day weekend hiking through the fall foliage and reconnecting after months of work stress. "I can't believe we're actually here," Rebecca said as she unpacked their suitcase in room 237. On October 9, 2012, the 34-year-old marketing manager had been looking forward to this getaway for months, especially after Jason's promotion too. Senior architect had consumed most of their summer. Jason, 36, was already studying the hiking maps spread across the antique writing desk. The concierge said the Maple Ridge Trail has the best views this time of year, and we could pack a lunch and make a whole day of it. The Grandview Lodge was everything they'd hoped for, a beautifully restored 1890s hotel perched on a hillside overlooking the Connecticut River Valley. Their room featured period furniture, a working fireplace, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered stunning views of the Vermont mountains painted in brilliant autumn colors. Saturday evening was perfect. They dined in the hotel's acclaimed restaurant, took a moonlit walk through the property's gardens, and fell asleep to the sound of wind rustling through maple trees outside their window. On Sunday morning, October 11th, they checked out early. To begin their planned hike, the desk clerk, Margaret Chen, remembered them clearly because Rebecca had asked about extending their stay another night. They seemed so happy, Margaret later told investigators. Mrs. Walsh was taking pictures of everything. Mr. Walsh was joking about wanting to buy the hotel and move to Vermont permanently. Security cameras showed the couple loading their hiking gear into their silver Honda Accord at 8:47 a.m. Were never seen again. Detective Linda Rodriguez of the Vermont State Police had worked missing persons cases for 12 years. But the Walsh disappearance presented unusual challenges. The couple's car was found 3 days later in the parking area of a popular trailhead, locked and undisturbed, with no signs of struggle or foul play. Their hiking backpacks were gone, but everything else was exactly as you'd expect, Rodriguez explained to the couple's families during a conference call. Water bottles in the cup holders, Rebecca's purse in the back seat with her wallet and credit cards intact, Jason's work phone plugged into the charger. The search effort was massive. Vermont search and rescue teams, assisted by volunteers from neighboring states, combed through miles of wilderness. The couple's planned route along Maple Ridge Trail was thoroughly searched, along with dozens of alternate paths they might have taken. The weather was perfect that weekend, recalled search coordinator Bill Matthews. No sudden storms, no dangerous conditions. They were experienced hikers with proper equipment. There's no reason they should have gotten into trouble. Rebecca's sister Sarah flew in from Denver to coordinate with media outlets and social media campaigns. Jason's brother Mike organized search volunteers and worked with a private investigator. The story gained national attention when it was featured on CNN and several missing persons websites. But despite hundreds of tips and leads, no trace of Rebecca and Jason Walsh was ever found. Their cell phones showed no activity after Saturday night. Their credit cards were never used again. Asterisk if stories like this one pull you in and make you question what's real and what's hidden. You're not alone. Here at Gone Cold, we investigate the disappearances that don't make sense, the cases that time forgot, and the clues that still whisper beneath the surface. If you're captivated by the strange case of the Walshes and want more deep dives into mysteries just like this one, do us a favor. Click the like button and subscribe. And extensive searches of local hospitals, morgues, and police stations yielded nothing. It's like they just walked into the forest and vanished, Rodriguez wrote in her final report after the case went cold 6 months later. No bodies, no equipment, no evidence of what happened to them after they left that parking area. The case remained officially open but inactive for 11 years. Rebecca and Jason Walsh were declared legally dead after 7 years, but their families never stopped hoping for answers. On October 10th, 2023, exactly 11 years and 1 day after the Walsh couple had checked out of the Grandview Lodge hotel maintenance worker, Carlos Ramirez was performing routine cleaning in room 237 when he made a discovery that would reopen one of Vermont's most baffling missing persons cases. While dusting the antique writing desk, Carlos noticed that one of the books in the room's decorative collection, leather-bound volume of Vermont hiking guides felt heavier than it should. When he opened it, he found that pages had been carefully cut out to create a hidden compartment. Inside the hollowed-out book was a folded piece of hotel stationery with a handwritten message that made Carlos's hand shake. If you find this, we're still alive but can't leave. GPS coordinates: 44.2619N, 72.5806W. Look for the red cabin. Trust no one at the lodge. R.N.J. Walsh. October 2023. The paper appeared fresh, written in blue ink that hadn't faded, despite the book having been undisturbed for years. More disturbing still, the handwriting matched samples from Rebecca Walsh's journal that had been part of the original investigation files. Carlos immediately contacted hotel manager Patricia Hartwell, who called the Vermont State Police within minutes. Detective Michael Torres, who had taken over cold cases from the retired Rodriguez, arrived at the scene within 2 hours. The handwriting analysis will take time, Torres explained to the gathered hotel staff. But these coordinates are only about 15 miles from here. In an area that was searched extensively in 2012, Margaret Chen, still working the front desk after 11 years, studied the note with growing unease. Room 237 has been occupied hundreds of times since the Walsh couple stayed here. How could a note dated 2023 appear in a book that's been here all along? Torres had the same question. Hotel records showed that room 237 had been cleaned weekly and thoroughly inspected quarterly. The antique books were dusted regularly and had never been reported as tampered with. Either someone recently planted this note, Torres concluded, or we're dealing with something that challenges our understanding of this case entirely. What Torres didn't know was that the coordinates in Rebecca's note led to a remote area where several other missing persons, cases from New England, had originated in, where locals whispered about strange disappearances that had been happening for decades, always around Columbus Day weekend. Detective Torres and his team reached the GPS coordinates from Rebecca's note after a grueling 2-hour hike through dense Vermont forest. The location was remote, accessible only by an unmarked trail that appeared to have been deliberately obscured. Over the years, "There," said Officer Sarah Kim, pointing through the trees. "I can see red paint." The cabin was small, maybe 20 by 30 feet, built from rough-hewn logs that suggested it had been constructed decades ago. But unlike the weathered, abandoned structures they'd expected to find, this building showed clear signs of recent maintenance. The red paint was fresh, the windows were intact, and smoke was rising from a stone chimney. "Someone's living here," Torres observed, checking his service weapon. "But according to county records, this land is owned by the state. There shouldn't be any structures here at all." As they approached the cabin, Torres noticed something that made his blood run cold. Hiking equipment scattered around the property that matched the descriptions of gear the Walsh couple had been carrying 11 years ago. A blue backpack, weather-beaten, but recognizable, hung from a hook on the porch. Officer Kim was examining the windows when she suddenly stepped back. "Detective, you need to see this." Through the main window, they could see into a sparsely furnished living area. And sitting at a rough wooden table, apparently writing in a journal, was a woman with graying hair who bore a striking resemblance to Rebecca Walsh. Torres called out, "Vermont State Police, we need to talk to whoever's inside." The table looked up, and even through the dusty glass, Torres could see the shock of recognition in her eyes. She moved quickly to the door, but instead of opening it, they heard the sound of multiple locks being engaged. "Please," came a muffled voice from inside. "You have to leave. It's not safe for you here. They'll know you came." "Ma'am, I'm Detective." "Torres? Are you Rebecca Walsh? Your family has been looking for you for 11 years." There was a long pause before the reply. "Rebecca Walsh died in these woods in 2012. I'm what's left of her. If you don't leave now, you'll end up like us." Torres's attempts to communicate with the woman in the cabin were interrupted by the sound of vehicles approaching through the forest. 3 black SUVs emerged from a hidden access road that hadn't been visible on any topographical maps, carrying men in tactical gear who moved with military precision. "You're trespassing on private property," announced the lead figure. Tall man in his 50s, wearing expensive outdoor gear that seemed oddly pristine for the remote location. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately," Torres showed. His badge, Detective Torres, Vermont State Police. We're investigating a missing persons case. Who are you, and what is this place? Dr. Marcus Holloway, the man replied smoothly. I run a private therapy retreat for individuals suffering from... But Officer Kim had been observing the compound through binoculars while Torres stalked. Detective, she whispered urgently, there are at least a dozen buildings hidden in these trees. This isn't just a cabin, it's a whole settlement.
Doctor?
Holloway's smile didn't reach his eyes. As I said, we treat individuals who need to completely disconnect from society. Many of our residents have been declared dead by the outside world, which is often part of their healing process. Are you saying Rebecca and Jason Walsh are patients here? Torres demanded. I can neither confirm nor deny the presence of any specific individuals. Patient confidentiality is paramount in our work. Torres was about to press further when his radio crackled. Detective Torres, this is dispatch. We've lost your GPS signal. What's your location? Torres looked at his radio in confusion. The display showed no signal bars despite the unit working perfectly an hour earlier. His cell phone showed the same problem. Officer Kim's equipment was similarly affected. Electromagnetic interference from our medical equipment, Dr. Drew, Holloway explained casually. It's necessary for some of our therapeutic procedures. I'm sure you understand. But Torres understood something else entirely. They were being deliberately cut off from the outside world. Whatever was happening at this compound, Doctor, Holloway was prepared to prevent communication with law enforcement. That evening, Torres and Kim established a surveillance position on a ridge overlooking the compound. Using night vision equipment, they were able to observe the settlements. Full scope at least 20 buildings connected by well-maintained paths, solar panels and satellite dishes, and signs of a sophisticated operation that had clearly been in place for years. This isn't some hippie commune, Kim observed. Look at the security measures, the technology. This is professionally run. Their surveillance revealed disturbing patterns. Individuals moved between buildings in groups, always accompanied by staff members. No one appeared to be free to wander alone. Several buildings had external locks that suggested the occupants weren't free to leave. At 11:30 p.m., they witnessed something that confirmed their worst suspicions. A new arrival. A van with darkened windows delivered what appeared to be an unconscious person to the compound's main building. The individual was carried inside on a stretcher while Dr. Holloway supervised the transfer. They're not treating voluntary patients, Torres realized. They're collecting people. Kim had been researching Dr. Holloway on her satellite phone during breaks in surveillance. Marcus Holloway was stripped of his medical license in 2008 for conducting unauthorized psychological experiments. He disappeared after being investigated by the FBI for involvement in several missing persons cases across New England. The pieces were falling into place. The compound wasn't a therapy retreat. It was a facility where Dr. Holloway was conducting long-term psychological experiments on people who had been abducted and declared dead by the outside world. Rebecca's note said they couldn't leave, Torres said grimly. She wasn't talking about being physically trapped. She was warning us about a man who's been collecting missing people for over a decade, convincing them that their old lives are over and that they belong to him now. Their investigation was interrupted by movement in the compound below. Figures with flashlights were climbing the ridge toward their position, moving with the organized efficiency of a search team. They know we're here, Kim whispered. How is that possible? Torres was already packing their equipment.
Act because, Doctor?
Holloway has been running this operation for 15 years. He knows exactly how to make people disappear, and he's not going to let two cops expose him now. As they retreated through the dark forest, Torres realized they faced an impossible choice: return with backup and risk Dr. Holloway relocating his entire operation and its victims, or find another way to expose a man who had perfected the art of making people vanish without a trace. Behind them, the lights of the compound grew brighter as search teams spread through the forest, hunting for the investigators who had stumbled upon one of New England's most carefully hidden secrets. Torres and Kim managed to evade Holloway's search teams and reach their vehicle by dawn, instead of calling for backup immediately. Torres made a calculated decision. They needed evidence that couldn't be destroyed or relocated before authorities arrived. Rebecca's note appeared in that hotel room for a reason, Torres told Kim as they drove back toward town. Someone inside the compound has been planning this for years. They returned to the Grand View Lodge and convinced Margaret Chen to let them examine room 237 again. This time, they found something they'd missed. Tiny pinholes in the wallpaper near the window marks that could only be seen from a specific angle. Someone's been watching this room, Kim realized, but from inside, not outside. Torres studied the hotel's architectural plans and discovered that room 237 shared a wall with a service corridor that connected to the building's old laundry chute system. Someone familiar with the hotel's layout could access the room without being seen. At 3 p.m., their surveillance paid off. A figure emerged from the service corridor and entered room 237. Jason Walsh. Older and thinner than in his missing person photos, but unmistakably alive. He quickly placed another note in the hollowed-out book and disappeared back into the corridor. Torres intercepted him. Jason Walsh, I'm Detective Torres. Your wife's message led us to you. Jason looked terrified. You can't be here. They realize I've been leaving messages. He glanced around frantically. Holloway has people everywhere. Staff, guests, even some local cops. How long have you been getting out? Kim asked. 2 years? Rebecca and I have been planning this. Holloway thinks his psychological conditioning worked on us, but we've been pretending. We know if we just disappeared, he'd find us. Needed someone to expose the whole operation. Jason's information led to a coordinated federal operation. The FBI, working with Vermont State Police, raided the compound at dawn on October 15th. 11 years and 4 days after Rebecca and Jason had first disappeared, what they found was worse than Torres had imagined. 23 people who had been declared dead or missing were living in the compound, most completely convinced that their previous lives had been fabrications created by mental illness. Dr. Holloway had been using a combination of isolation, medication, and psychological manipulation to break down his victims' sense of identity, then rebuilding them as dependent patients who believed they needed his treatment to survive. He told us we had dissociative identity disorder, Rebecca explained during her FBI debriefing. That our memories of our old lives were delusions. After months of isolation and drugs, most people started to believe it, but Rebecca and Jason had managed to resist by secretly supporting each other and planning their escape. The notes in the hotel room were their way of reaching the outside world without alerting Holloway's network of supporters. Holloway was arrested without resistance, but his final words to Torres were chilling. You think this is over? I have colleagues? This work is too important to stop. The FBI discovered files indicating that Holloway had been part of a larger network of researchers conducting unauthorized human experiments, using missing persons as involuntary subjects. The investigation would eventually lead to raids in 4 other states. The psychological recovery of Holloway's victims was complicated. Some, like Rebecca and Jason, had maintained enough of their original personalities to eventually reintegrate into society. Others had been so thoroughly conditioned that they couldn't accept that their old lives had been real. Rebecca and Jason Walsh returned to Chicago 6 months after their rescue, but they were forever changed by their experience. Rebecca became an advocate for missing persons' families, while Jason left his architecture career to work with cult deprogramming organizations. People ask if we're glad we survived, Rebecca told a reporter on the first anniversary of their rescue. But we didn't just survive, we lost 11 years of our lives. We missed funerals, birthdays, the chance to have children. Holloway didn't just imprison our bodies, he stole our time. The Grand View Lodge installed a memorial plaque in room 237, honoring those who never stopped fighting to come home. The room is no longer rented to guests, instead serving as a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary places can hide extraordinary acts of courage. Epilogue: Dr. Marcus Holloway was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His network was dismantled, leading to the rescue of 47 additional victims across New England. Rebecca's notes continued to appear in the hotel room for months after the rescue, till Margaret Chen realized they were being left by other former victims who visited the lodge as part of their healing process. Each note contained the same message: thank you for not giving up. The case became a landmark in the study of long-term psychological captivity and the resilience of the human spirit. Rebecca and Jason's 11-year fight to maintain their identities while appearing to submit to their captor became a textbook example of survival psychology. They never returned to Vermont for vacation, but every Columbus Day. They place flowers at the memorial for missing persons in Chicago's Grant Park, honoring those who are still waiting to be found and those who never made it home.